Welcome to Boise Startup Week.
Great to be
First
here.
question, do you know where Boise is?
Yes, it's in Idaho.
Have you been to Boise?
No, but I'm from Maine, and I have this feeling, first of all, big potato states, both of them, but I have a feeling that it's the kind of place that a person from Maine would really like.
Awesome. So welcome to Boise virtually. I'm super excited about this interview because you and I have gotten to know each other recently, but have kind of hit it off right away. So let's just jump right in and talk about what you're known for. So I've never met anybody who's known for introducing a word into the English lexicon, but you're one of those people. Tell us, what word did you make up and how did you come about it?
Yeah, so the word that I made up is the word FOMO, short for fear of missing out. You've probably used it in your daily life or in your work at one point or another, if you're listening to this. And it comes out of my experience as an MBA student at Harvard Business School. I started business school right after 9/11. I kind of had this feeling like the world was going to end. I had to live every moment like it was my last, the carpe diem kind of mindset. And I got up to Boston and there were so many opportunities, from social activities to classes to work, you name it. I wanted to do it all, be at everything all the time, to the point where I was constantly stressed out. And I started calling that a fear of missing out. I wrote an article in a school newspaper about it way back in 2004. And 10 years later, it made its way into the Oxford English Dictionary.
Does it piss you off that you're not credited every time somebody uses it?
Listen, I guess like it would be nice, but at the same time, a lot of people say, well, do you wish you had a trademark on it from the beginning or something like that? And it's sort of like, yeah, of course,
That's silly.
Then people wouldn't use it. So
Right.
You just have to take it like the cards as they're handed and then roll with it.
Yeah. So you're the guy who invented FOMO. You don't want to be known as that, your entire life. So why don't you tell us the other wonderful things about you before we jump into your latest book?
Yeah, I'm more than just FOMO. That's right. I'm not just as a one note samba over here. But basically, really quick, my story is I came out of college. I did venture capital in Latin America, investing in all the sort of startups in the first wave of the internet. After business school, I did investing in high growth companies all over the world, from Turkey and Pakistan to Colombia to China to you name it. And everything was going really well. But unfortunately for me, I was working at a division of AIG, which blew up in 2008. I was in the middle of that. So then I decided that I would never put my future in the hands of one company ever again. I started doing side projects, investing in startups in my free time. A couple of those have gone on to become unicorns. And I ended up writing a book about how to be a part-time entrepreneur called The 10% Entrepreneur, which I know that you are a big fan of as well. This whole mindset of sort of doing side projects as a way to diversify yourself, to learn, to try new things. And then after that book came out and I was sort of running around, I wrote this next book about FOMO. And now I have also a podcast called FOMO Sapiens, where I talk to all kinds of crazy people, from Andrew Yang all the way through to Jay Shetty, about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial mindsets.
Let's talk about, we have a lot of people who are tuning in, more so than ever, because this is the first time Boise Startup Week is virtual. And most entrepreneurs that I meet are, what we kind of look down upon and call entrepreneurs. So I want to first start by talking about that word. Do you view that as a negative word? And at what point do you stop being a entrepreneur and become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I use that term sometimes too. And I think, to me, a entrepreneur is a specific thing. Somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur and is working on an idea, to me, I don't necessarily think that of that as a entrepreneur. To me, a entrepreneur is that person who goes to all the meetups, wears the hustle t-shirt, tells people they're an entrepreneur when they're not really an entrepreneur, and is more about selling the lifestyle and being part of the lifestyle of entrepreneurship than actually doing the work of entrepreneurship. So that, I think, is valid. And I know that, we all know that person who's gone to they're at every entrepreneurship event, but you don't know what their company is. And they're just sort of flitting around. So I think that person I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's an opportunity to maybe convert them into a real entrepreneur. And I think, people who are starting companies are fantastic and we should support them.
I have not been always comfortable explaining my background as an entrepreneur or even being referred to as an entrepreneur. And only after about 8 years or so after Social Tables, right before we sold, is when I started being comfortable with being referred to as an entrepreneur. I'm wondering if that's something common. Do you think we should kind of throw that word around, or should we reserve it to a certain class of entrepreneurs, so to speak?
It's very good. I love that you use the word comfort, Don. And I think that is the thing that you felt. If I'm going to get inside your head, it's like there's a lot of questions around level of comfort and discomfort and what success is and what it isn't. And for me, if you are doing the work and you are in an uncomfortable place and you've put yourself out there, I feel okay about you using that. And I think it's admirable. I mean, what I don't like is when you see the person, and this happens a lot, like on their Instagram profile, on their LinkedIn profile, I'm an entrepreneur. It's like, well, you actually haven't done anything. You haven't put yourself out there. You haven't put anything at risk. So therefore, it's trendy to say, right? It's like everybody wants to be an influencer too, but if you have 37 followers, you're not an influencer. And so
right.
I think you've got to use the term. You have to be somebody who has put something, you have stakes in the game, you put something at risk, and you've held yourself to a very high bar in terms of what you did. But I would say, I talk to entrepreneurs all the time who are people who are just getting going, but they put something into it. And so I think it's okay to use the term.
How does someone who writes about FOMO go to become a 10% entrepreneur, expert? And by the way, 10% is really it's a relative, right? It can be like, 5%, it can be 95%. As long as you have something else going on, you're a 10% entrepreneur. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, I like to think it's a minimum of 10% of your time, money, and energy, because because when we talk about that sacrifice for the stakes, that's where it starts. I said 10%, and I'll tell you why. There were really two reasons. Number one is that, well, three. One is I originally wanted to make it a 20% entrepreneur. And then I thought, wow, that's a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
Number two is I thought about the concept of a tithe. When you tithe to a church, and these are, the concept of tithing exists in many religions, Islam, Christianity, I think Judaism. It's about giving amount that's meaningful, but that you don't have to upset your entire life. And so that's why I like this number. And then interestingly, the American Angel Capital Association that tracks stats around angel investing found that the average angel investor puts about 10% of their net worth into deals. So the market sort of clears at 10%, right? As a starting point. You could go above that. Now, why am I an expert? Because I have massive FOMO, right? The inventor of FOMO, it's been part of me, and I wanted to do and be all things. But at the same time, I'm risk averse. People with FOMO are risk averse a lot of times because if they just did things, they wouldn't have to have FOMO. And so I recognized in myself that quality. And after the financial crisis, when my career and life blew up, I thought all my friends in the Valley in entrepreneurial ventures seem to be doing pretty well right now while Wall Street is blown up. But I'm too risk averse to just do one thing, to just start that startup. I don't have the idea. I don't have the experience. And so why don't I start with part of my time and money, do it in a low risk fashion, diversify myself, explore a lot of different areas, let my FOMO, sort of ferment a little bit. And that's where the whole concept came from. And now, 10 years later, I've done over 20 different projects, wrote a book about it. I'm a big believer in this. I think it's super apt for the time that we're in right now, given what's going on in the world. And I'm just a big believer.
Yeah, it's almost as if the pandemic and people having to rethink how they spend their time has probably created more entrepreneurs. Obviously, there are many sad stories about places closing and not reopening. However, it probably has given birth to, some people who are dabbling in the 10% entrepreneurship. Is that fair to say, do you think?
Absolutely. And I think people embrace change in their lives. Some people just do it because it was always there and they found the power to do it and they're ready to go. And that's awesome. And we all do those things. Like I ran the New York City Marathon because I just one day decided to do it and I did it. And it's a big undertaking.
How'd you do?
I did all right. I mean, 4.5 hours with 18 miles of headwinds. It was like the worst weather in the history of the race. So I was training for 4, but I'll take it.
Congratulations.
But
That's pretty good.
thank you. It's gonna be my last one. But first and last. But most of us, and especially me, my own personal experiences, change is something that happens to us, and we are put in a situation and we must react. We must dig deep. And so I think this moment in time, which stinks, let's just all accept that for a lot of people, you can simply let the world happen to you, or you can pivot. And you see so many people who are pivoting to digital, and I've done that in my own way, right? Like all my stuff was canceled too, and I had to find new ways of doing things. And so I think this is a moment to do that. Now, the beauty of the 10% is you're not throwing all your eggs in one basket. You're testing things, you're trying things before you go all in. And that's the beauty of the model.
Mm. So let's talk about, I want to spend the next kind of section of this interview to really talk about advice for the 10% entrepreneurs. And the way I think about it, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but there's folks who want to do something. There's folks who are doing something and it's not going well. And there's folks who are doing something that's going really well. Is that a fair bucketing system?
Absolutely.
Okay. So for those who are tuned in and they, have an idea or they have something they're passionate about and they want to devote some time, what can they do as soon as they finish listening to this?
So the first step, and this is something that I see all the time. You have an idea that you have your idea. You're walking down the street one day and you think, how come somebody doesn't make a shirt that you never have to wash? Wouldn't that be great? Okay, maybe interesting, right? Maybe I should do that as my project. Okay, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to figure this. Well, okay, you are. You don't know how to sew. You know nothing about materials. You know nothing about fashion. Is this the highest and best use of your time? Ideas are cheap, right? But actually building a business requires networks and skills and insights and stick-with-itness and all these things. And so I encourage people, the first step is to think deeply about what you're good at and what you like to do. Because what you're good at will make you successful, and what you like to do will help you to be committed. And so think about those areas and ideas within those areas. And I think that's one of the things. It sounds so obvious, but the amount of times I talk to a brand new entrepreneur who has a deck and they say, what do you think of my idea? And I'm like, idea is interesting. Why you? And then there's not a cogent answer. That is one of the biggest predictors I see of success and failure in entrepreneurship, because and I know you know this too. It's like you see that second or third time founder who's made a lot of mistakes. And one of the big mistakes that they have learned from is don't do things where you have no domain expertise. Right. And so I really encourage people to think about that. Of course, there are examples of people who are successful. Of course there are. It's not that you can't succeed, but your probability of succeeding is all that much higher. And so I think that's a really, really good place to start. The other thing that you need to do is think carefully about how much time and money you can devote to this endeavor. So if you tell me, Patrick, I have no time. I have, maybe an hour a month. I would say, that's cool. You should not be the primary mover on this. Why don't you get involved with somebody else's project as an advisor, an investor, something like that? If you tell me I have zero money, but I have lots of time, fantastic. We can work with that too, but don't come up with a model for a business where you need to build a, $500,000 prototype. Find something cheap. And so there's all these things you can start to think about once you get there. And on my website, I have, free downloadable tools that will help you get started. It's obviously in the book as well.
I do have a comment about something you said around having like what we kind of call in the HR world person vocation fit, like doing something you're kind of good at and within your domain. And while I agree with that, I didn't know anything about event planning before I started Social Tables. I mean, I was planning events, but I didn't know this whole world existed with software. So I agree. My only caveat is that's probably even more true if you only have 10% of your time to do it.
Yeah. That's a very fair. Listen, and again, there are people who come from the outside, and because they're an outsider, their insights are so powerful. So I don't discount that at all.
Yeah.
But what you're saying there about the 10% is more powerful. What you're trying to do is it's like when you have limited time and energy, you want the economies of scale, it's like, you want everything to be very integrated. And so the more that you set yourself up to do something where you can be more successful, the more your time will generate. And I think that's, you've just hit the nail on the head.
Patrick, for our audience who doesn't know, could you just talk about real quick, what percent of, the millennials or whatever you want to call this generation does like have a freelance thing or a contract gig? Because it's a pretty high number compared to other generations. Is that not right?
That is right. And in fact, the numbers that I've seen, it's rather sketchy, right? So, it's hard to know. And there's also this there's noise in the numbers because oftentimes we think about the gig economy as part of this. And I make a distinction. Driving for Lyft or Uber is definitely the gig economy, and it's great. It is not 10% entrepreneurship, because 10% entrepreneurship is about having an ownership stake in what you build so that you could theoretically even raise money someday or get partners and build it up. There, when you work for an Uber or a Lyft, you don't necessarily have that, right? I mean, they may give you equity, which in that case, then that's totally the case. But it's different from, for example, just doing, sort of one-off as a TaskRabbit or something. The numbers that I've seen, though, are roughly 40% of millennials are working on some sort of side project, which is incredible. And it's validated just anecdotally. The amount of people I meet who have something going on the side is shocking.
Okay, so let's talk about the 10% entrepreneur. Again, 10% being relative. Somebody's got a side hustle, not going so well. All right. What do they do? Because I get a lot of questions. People are like, oh, I want to start, start a startup, whatever. And I'm like, please don't. Just go join another business. The startup economy needs eager, driven individuals so that they can learn fast and then go on and do their own thing eventually. Because if everybody that I wanted to hire would have started a startup, we wouldn't have had anybody to hire. So somebody's not going well. What's your advice to them? Give it to them no, don't hold anything back.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The beauty of the 10% is that while there are stakes, the stakes are low. The cost of failure is low. And so you can get into this situation where you're kind of keeping at it in a very half-hearted way, partially because it's become part of your identity. Like everybody's like, oh, Patrick's working on his thing. And so it becomes part of your sort of, the story that you tell about yourself to the rest of the world. Now, the reality is there is psychic value to doing these things. But I find that if you are working on something and it's not really going anywhere, and you're not excited about it anymore, and you're not spending the time on it, that's kind of what's going to tell you that. If it's not going anywhere, you're not going to feel inspired to work on it. And so I would pay close attention to that. I would also say when you're getting going, setting some basic sort of criteria about what success looks like for you. So all the time people say to me, I'm working on this side project, it's going well, but I don't know if I should do it full time or not. And that's okay. It may be that you never do something full time. You always have it as a side project, but kind of thinking about your objectives. Why am I doing this? What is an acceptable outcome to me? And how am I doing on that journey? That really will help you, along with figuring out, do I even enjoy this anymore? To decide whether you should continue doing it. Because the great thing about 10% is that if it's not working, you can walk away, you can do something else.
Or you have your other job.
Yeah. But you can keep your job and then you can start a new project next year.
Right. So that brings me to the third category, which is, okay, I'm a 10% entrepreneur. I got a side hustle going on. It's going awesome. Okay. What do I do? It reminds me of my story, which is I was working at a consulting firm. I was basically working on social tables, nights and weekends. That was taking up more and more of my time. And I basically started using my employer as my first angel investor. And I did everything I could to almost get fired so that I would be able to still get an income, but work on social tables, for as long as I could. And then I eventually quit.
Yeah, then that's that's such a classic way to do this, right? It's so smart. And as long as you act ethically, and you're not like using the, corporate card to pay for your server, you're in good stead. Now, what I
For the record,
see.
I was not using
Oh
a
yeah,
FOMO
I
card.
don't think that's not you. I don't think that's you.
Yeah.
And nor should it be you.
No,
Everybody's listening.
that's right.
So with that person, you get this interesting question like, when do I jump? Should I go full time? Right? That's the question
Yes.
you're essentially asking. So here's how I think about that. If things are going well and you're feeling good about it, and you feel that you can either live off this business, you can actually survive, or you can raise money, you should go ahead and do this, right? Raise the money or live off the profits. But like, you want to be able to do this from a level of comfort. You don't want to quit your job, have something that's not making enough money, and then all of a sudden you've got sort of like your runway is very short and you have all this pressure, right? The whole point is to be able to go to do this with energy. Now, if you cannot do that, but you think you cannot sort of manage this on your own, you're like, I can't quit quite yet, I can't raise money, but this is taking on a life of its own, what should I do? You should do what my friend Luke Holden did. Now, Luke is the CEO of a company called Luke's Lobster. You may remember Luke's
Oh
Lobster.
yeah, Luke's Lobster. They had one in Georgetown.
They did, yeah. So Luke,
Wait, weren't they on Shark Tank?
No, there was the Lobster Brothers.
Oh,
They're like they're another lobster company, not my favorite, but they do exist.
I feel like you know every lobster personally since you're from Maine.
I do, and I met Luke many years ago when he was just getting going. I heard about him. I called him up, and I said I reached out through people, and I said, I've heard about you. You're from Maine. You went to Georgetown just like me. You're starting this lobster thing. I want to hear how you did this. Like, tell me the story. And it turned out he had come out of Georgetown, got a job on Wall Street, and on his nights and weekends started this thing. And when he opened his first store, he couldn't do it on his own. He had the capital to start the store. He raised a little money from him and his father, but he couldn't afford to quit. He basically had no money. And, so he found on Craigslist a co-founder. And this guy, Ben Conniff, joined him. And Ben had worked in the food industry, brought things to the table that Luke didn't have. Ben could be there during the day to run the shop. And they paid back the initial investment in the first store in 17 days. And so then they basically opened another shop later that year when Luke could afford to pay himself a minimal salary, and he quit. And so there you go. Find that person who can become your co-founder. I think it's a really powerful way to sort of get to the point where you can leave.
We have just a couple more minutes left here, Patrick, and I want to get into some of the things you're working on. First and foremost, how is COVID impacting your creativity? Are you able to do more, do less, or the same?
It's such a good question. I think it has made me more creative and resourceful because I've had to. The superpower. I hate when people say the superpower, but I'm just going to say it because I don't know. It's what came to my head. The superpower you need to do to survive this moment is flexibility. Like if you're not practicing yoga in your house and in your mind, you're in trouble. And so I think, like, my brother's a jazz musician, his wife's a dancer, and all of us talk about this stuff, right? It's like all of us have had to pivot the way we do things and question. And if you don't do that, you are in trouble. And so I've actually found that it's forced me to be more creative. And I've also felt liberated because I think right now all the rules are just, who knows what's happening with the rules. Right. So like, just do, like, be real. And I think that helps people to be more creative.
Yeah, I've been saying if you haven't changed something somehow, some way during COVID, you're doing COVID wrong.
Totally.
I recognize that's a position of privilege to be able to say,
Yes.
but I'm not just talking about physical location or whatever. I'm talking about just even your commute to work or whatever it is, just something to get you out of the rut that we've been experiencing prior, since it's been a rat race. Okay. So you're more creative, and that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. You got a new term. So you're no longer a one-trick pony when it comes to American lexicon. What's this new term? And because I love it, and I think it's actually even better than FOMO. Because I'm a risky dude. I don't care about. I never miss anything out, but like a lot of people do. So what is this new term?
So the thing is, it's not new.
Okay.
Because I came up with it. It's new to you.
Yeah, sorry. It's new to me. It's probably new to the audience.
Yes. And I came up with it the same time as I came up with FOMO. I wrote an article.
Stop.
You didn't know? Yeah. Like the article I wrote, I should have it handy to show people.
Yeah, you need it somewhere.
You can Google this. May 10th, 2004, the article was called Social Theory at HBS, McGinnis's Two Foes, FOMO and FOBO, Fear of a Better Option.
Oh my God. I thought this was new. I thought we were going to break news here. And you're telling me this is a 16-year-old term.
This term, but it only I was always like, okay, FOMO's a thing now. That's nice. But the FOBO, to me, that was always the interesting
better.
thing.
That FOBO is better.
Totally agree. And then the New York Times, I was sitting at the Standard Grill in New York City in the summer of 2018, having lunch. My phone blows up.
By the way,
Literally,
for non-New Yorkers, that's a New York Flex, Standard Grill, New York Flex.
It's just down the street from me. It's not expensive. It's just cool. So it was a New York Flex. If you come to New York, call. We'll go. But anybody. Anyway, I'm sitting there. My phone blows up to the point where almost flew off the table because Tim Herrera of the New York Times Smarter Living wrote an article about FOBO and did not mention me. And so I wrote him an email.
Stop.
I wrote him an email. And here's a great lesson. I didn't know Tim, and now I do, and he's an awesome guy. So I wrote, I was like, listen, actually, I invented FOBO, and here's the proof. And he was like, oh, this is so cool. Well, you want to do an interview? And so we did. And then that sort of hit, and a bunch of other stuff happened. And then a bunch of other, The Guardian wrote about it, and the Boston Globe, and whatever. But the point about FOBO is this. FOBO is about it's an affliction of abundance. It's about having too much choice. It's about getting on and I live this. I have all the streaming services. I mean, it's awful. I try to order on Seamless. I can't. I ended up just making a terrible sandwich in my house because we're overwhelmed with choice. And that's the thing. That is all about privilege. You go to a place where people are struggling or are having problems. They don't have that problem. They may have the FOMO. They don't have the FOBO. So when you are given such privilege, don't waste it on having FOBO.
That's why I love being vegan, because I go out, there's nothing for me to eat. So I really limits my choices. There's only one thing on the menu I can order. So I'm all about limiting choices. I've been on this road trip since April 1st. And I've resettled here in Boise, but I've been living out of a duffel bag since April 1st. And, now it's 5 months, and I've had really the same 10 shirts, except for the free shirts I get along the way, same pair of shoes, and less, there's no fear of better opportunities when it comes to my dress code. Anyway, that's all the time we have. Patrick, closing thoughts on getting in touch with you, getting in your head, because I've loved this time together. I love reading your materials. What's the best way to get in touch with you and to follow your wisdom?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. And I hope to visit Boise someday for real. And we'll hang out there.
Would love that.
The best way to find me is patrickmcginnis.com. My podcast, which is available all the places you get podcasts, called FOMO Sapiens. If you like this conversation, you're going to love the show. And then you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, where I am a big follower of Don's here. And those are the best places to find me. You can always email me at letsconnect@patrickmcginnis.com.
But you're going to respond to emails.
Do I respond?
You respond to emails.
I do. I batch them and I respond. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's connect at patrickmcginnis.com. Did I get that right?
You did.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Good luck with the new book. I know I'm excited about it. And take care.
Thank you so much. And we'll be in touch.